Time for class to start again. And we are going to start with a short film. I want to make a disclaimer. We'll be talking about this very soon, but I don't believe everything that gets said in this, but I just want to see the argument. So I'm going to lay out the fine-tuning arguments by showing you this video here.
From galaxies and stars down to atoms and subatomic particles, the very structure of our universe is determined by these numbers. These are the fundamental constants and quantities of the universe. Scientists have come to the shocking realization that each of these numbers has been carefully dialed to an astonishingly precise value, a value that falls within an exceedingly narrow, life-permitting range. If any one of these numbers were altered by even a hair's breadth, no physical, interactive life of any kind could exist anywhere. There'd be no stars, no life, no planets, no chemistry. Consider gravity, for example. The force of gravity is determined by the gravitational constant. If this constant varied by just 1 in 10 to the 60th parts, none of us would exist. To understand how exceedingly narrow this life-permitting range is, imagine a dial divided into 10 to the 60th increments. To get a handle on how many tiny points on the dial this is, compare it to the number of cells in your body, or the number of seconds that have ticked by since time began. If the gravitational constant had been out of tune by just one of these infinitesimally small increments, the universe would either have expanded and thinned out so rapidly that no stars could form and life couldn't exist, or it would have collapsed back on itself with the same result: no stars, no planets, and no life. Consider the expansion rate of the universe. This is driven by the cosmological constant. A change in its value by a mere 1 part in 10 to the 120th parts would cause the universe to expand too rapidly or too slowly. In either case, the universe would again be life prohibiting. Or another example of fine-tuning. If the mass and energy of the early universe were not evenly distributed to an incomprehensible precision of 1 part in 10 to the 10 to the 123rd, the universe would be hostile to life of any kind. The fact is, our universe permits physical, interactive life only because these, and many other numbers, have been independently and exquisitely balanced on a razor's edge. Wherever physicists look, they see examples of fine-tuning. The remarkable fact is that the values of these numbers seem to have been very finely adjusted to make possible the development of life. If anyone claims not to be surprised by the special features that the universe has, he's hiding his head in the sand. These special features are surprising and unlikely. What is the best explanation for this astounding phenomenon? There are 3 live options. The fine-tuning of the universe is due to either physical.
Actually, we're not going to listen. We're not going to listen to their explanations here because I have my own. But so we've got. I hope you can a little bit see. Sorry. Yeah. You can a little bit see what the argument is, right? So the argument is kind of, it's like the design argument, but slightly differently. It's not about design in nature, say of a hummingbird, but it points out some purported, let's just say purported fact about the universe, that there's a bunch of physical constants that physics has no explanation of, right? There's no part of physics that says the gravitational constant must be this. So physics doesn't explain why the constants are what they are. But if they had been in any way different, life couldn't have existed. So then the argument is supposed to go, well, if they could have been any way different, life wouldn't have existed. Then it seems as though maybe the best explanation, one of the things that they were going to present, is an intelligent being created the universe in such a way that life could exist. because there was an intelligent being that wanted life to exist. And there's only exactly one way to do this, to be very precise and set this constant to this constant to this constant to this. If the constants were allowed to just kind of fall by random, then we'd never get life. But we do have life, and the constants are perfectly tuned for life existing. Therefore, it must be that, you know, there's this being that chose to do this, and that being is God, right? So this is an argument that definitely the people who made that video think supports God's existence, right? And you will hear this argument quite a lot. Although, interestingly enough, you will hear other people say very different things. For instance, you know, in trying to find a video to show that like quickly explains the fine tuning, because it's not good if Michael talks about physics. I watched a Brian Greene video. Brian Greene's a physicist. He starts by going, the universe is fine-tuned, and then his conclusion is string theory is correct, right? So he thinks that is a different explanation that's not God. But lots of scientists genuinely take the existence of fine-tuning as something that's real, right? But I've put up here that it may not be real. Why? Well, just because Michael doesn't know. I'm not a physicist, and physicists disagree with one another, right? So some physicists, and we'll see a quote from one pretty soon, say, actually, this is all mistaken. This is bad mathematics, bad logic, bad reasoning, bad physics. If you understand the physics, there is no fine-tuning. So some physicists say that. But as I say, other physicists like Brian Greene say, actually, there is fine-tuning, and there's a physics explanation for why. And then other people, various religious people, say there is fine-tuning, and the explanation is God's existence. Can I tell you who's correct, whether there, or at least about whether there's fine-tuning or not? Not really, because I'm not a physicist and I don't know, right? So when two experts who I recognize as experts disagree with one another, I don't know how to, it's, you know, that case of Hume where you have equally good testimony annihilating on both sides, right? So I don't really know what to believe. I'm just going to present to you the argument. If fine-tuning is true, then God exists, right? And then it's up to you to learn your physics and find out whether fine-tuning is true, right? So here's the various possibilities. They say that there's 3 possibilities. I want to talk about 5. I think I have time to do that. But my 5 possibilities are, first, it could be that the first premise that the universe is fine-tuned in this way is false. It's not fine-tuned. Oh, wait. The constants aren't finely tuned, or the constants aren't tuned at all. Oh, yeah, sorry. So what do I mean by the difference here? One is that you know, that the leeway that they're talking about, oh, it's only 1 in 10 to the power of 60 to the power of 123 or whatever. Those numbers, that's the like extremely fine-tuningness, where we say, oh, it has to be right here. There's not much leeway in what the constant could be in order for life to still exist. It's possible that actually there's more leeway and people have just done the calculation. The people presenting this argument have done the calculations incorrectly. And then another view would be that it kind of doesn't matter what the constants are. Like they're not tuned at all. They could have, you could just spin all the dials and still get a universe that would have life. Third possibility, fine-tuning is a coincidence. It just so happens that this is part and parcel or similar to this version we'll get to. Fourth is that an intelligent designer designed it and finely tuned the constants. And fifth is one that kind of piggybacks on the accident idea, but says there's more of an explanation here than we might think. This is the multiverse explanation, which you'll see a lot of the physicists who believe in fine-tuning think that it's an argument for a multiverse and not an argument for God, right? but I'll try to explain all those different ones. So here's another physicist. This is Sean Carroll. He's an American physicist, pretty famous, shows up on television and stuff, well-respected guy. So you can take what he says as, I would say you can normally just believe what he says, but in this case, since what he says disagrees with what some other physicists say, I don't know. I'm just going to give you the quote. So he says, there's a famous example that theists like to give. Theists are people who believe in God, or even cosmologists who haven't thought about it enough. So he's like, even physicists also give this argument, but I don't think that they've thought about it well enough. That the expansion rate, so we saw that was lambda in the video, the expansion rate of the universe, is tuned to within 1 part in 10 to the 60th, right? And we saw that number in the video too. That's the naive estimate, back of the envelope, pencil and paper you would do. But in this case, you can do better. You can go into the equations of general relativity, and there is a correct, rigorous derivation of the probability. And when you ask that same question using the correct equations, you find that the probability is 1, right? So instead of the probability being, so instead of the probability that it would land specifically here that would support life being 1 in 10 to the 60th, the probability that it would land here is 100%. According to Sean Carroll, if you do the physics correctly, he says, you find that it must be this one way and that the physics does have an explanation of what's going on. So he says, all but a set of measure zero early universe cosmologies, so measure zero means 0% probability, have the right expansion rate to live for a long time and allow life to exist, right? So Carroll is saying there's actually a 0% chance that things could have been any way different, right? So all 100% of the possible expansion rates in physics allow for life to exist. The expansion rate is not fine-tuned. Right? So that's what Carroll says. Is he right? Well, in order to decide that, you'd have to do what he says and go into the equations of relativity and calculate all that stuff, which he didn't give you a formula for how to do it. So even then, I don't know how to do it. But I take it that he's staking his reputation on this claim. Look, people think the universe is finely tuned. That's what you get if you do the easy, simple math that's on the back of the envelope. But if you do it in a harder way to make sure you get the right answer and not just estimate a correct answer, what you find is there is no fine-tuning. So that's at least some physicists disagree with the fine-tuning hypothesis. Secondly, what about the possibility that there's no fine-tuning at all? Remember what I said is that these physical constants are such that physics doesn't explain why they are what they are. So you can't look at the other laws of physics and then work out what the gravitational constant should be. The gravitational constant is just, seems to be arbitrarily that way, right? There's no explanation of why it's this number rather than any other number. And so one starts to think, well, then couldn't it have been this? Couldn't it have been this? It's just this one way. So like, must have been tuned to be that way. But what if we discover physics in the future that does explain these things, right? So we haven't finished all of physics yet. So just because our current physics doesn't tell us why the gravitational constant is what it is, doesn't mean that future physics won't tell us why the gravitational constant is what it is, right? So if we come up with a better theory that says these constants aren't free parameters that can be this way or that way, but rather that they have to be one way because of the laws of physics are this, and they say that the world must be this way, and that all the constants are explained by the laws, just because they're not currently explained doesn't mean they won't be explained in the future, right? So this doesn't defeat the fine-tuning argument. It just says, well, it kind of puts the fine-tuning argument on the position after like Hume beat it up. Hume beat up Paley's design argument, where it was sort of like, okay, well, we see how it could be, that a different hypothesis besides God is possible. But you haven't yet told us what it is, right? So far, physics hasn't discovered the undiscovered physics that would need to exist in order to explain these parameters, right? So that's another possibility. Possibility number 3, it's just an accident. There are accidents in the world. For example, when the moon passes between the Earth and the sun, the moon is the same apparent size as the sun. It's not the same size as the sun, but it's the same apparent size, right? If we look out, it covers as much of the field as the sun does. It exactly covers up the sun. And you might ask yourself, what is the reason why the moon and the sun have the same apparent size in the sky? They appear equally as big. The answer is that's an accident. It didn't used to be true in the past. It won't be true in the future, right? So the moon is slowly moving away from Earth. So as it gets further and further, it will get smaller and smaller. So in millions of years, tens of millions of years, hundreds of millions of years, the moon won't cover up the sun, right? And in the past, like long time ago, when the moon was closer, the moon covered up more than just the sun, right? It was bigger. So the fact that they're the same size now is just an accident, right? Now, the fine-tuning argument is supposed to be like, well, we agree that accidents are possible, but sometimes accidents are just a little bit too accidental, right? If there's only one in a 10 to the 60th power chance that life could have existed, if the constants were random, but life does exist, that seems like a super improbability. Not as low, it's probably pretty low probability if we landed on a million random planets and we looked at their moons and we tried to figure out whether the moon had the same apparent size as the star in that planet system. We'd probably find that it's pretty rare, but still happens sometimes, right? But 1 in the power of 10 to the 60th, which the video suggested was more than the amount of seconds that have ticked by since the universe came to exist. That just seems like too low of a probability to be merely an accident. So accident is on the table, but maybe we'd like to say more than just it's an accident. Cool. Oh, sorry, I had an explanation, but yeah. Possibility number 4 is, of course, that God did it, right? That the reason why all the constants of nature are set right where they need to be set in order for life to exist, supposing that we accept fine-tuning, is because an intelligent designer came along and picked for each of them, it must be here because if it's anywhere else, life won't exist. It must be here because if it's anywhere else, life won't exist. It must be here, and so on and so forth. And that the intelligent designer set all the constants of the universe so that life could exist. That's the explanation of existing life in the universe, is we wouldn't be here unless an intelligent designer had come along and set all the constants to the appropriate place. I cannot recall why I picked this cat picture with a butter on it. All right. Okay. Intelligent designer wanted life to exist, so it tuned the constants of nature so that life would exist. I mean, you can, depending on your own views of God, you might think that this is kind of silly. Yeah, if God's all powerful, why not just suspend all the laws of nature and go poof, life, right? Seems like a roundabout way to do it, but I guess you could add in some more arguments about why God wants nature to be mechanical and follow these specific laws, but still wants life in there. So he has to jiggle the laws until they can allow for life. Seems like an overcomplicated thing for an intelligent designer to do. If the intelligent designer is all powerful, but perhaps there are other reasons why the designer wants to constrain itself to a world with the current physical laws that we have. So that's possibility number 4. I should point out that some people kind of run with the idea of fine tuning and say, well, look, we know that, okay, I'm willing to believe that there is an intelligent designer that did design this world that we live in very specifically so that life could exist within it. And the designer that I'm going to believe in is a simulator. Somebody who wants to, they're running an experiment. They want to find stuff out about, different universes and stuff. So within their computer, they run a simulation. That simulation is intelligently designed, and that simulation is the world that we live in, right? So we are all simulated beings. Why is everything finely tuned for our existence? Well, because the simulation is supposed to include beings like us for whatever reason, right? So our world is intelligently designed. It was created by an intelligent designer, but that designer wasn't a god, but rather just, like a bored teenager in a higher level universe who is running a complicated simulation, right? Who knows about what the laws are like in the higher level universe, but just in that universe, somebody there wants to simulate life in a world like ours. And so they create a computer simulation that has these laws set up so that life can exist. And that's why the elements of nature or the constants of nature are finely tuned, because we are intelligently designed. We're intelligently designed by whatever beings in a higher universe are simulating our existence. Right? So this is called the simulation hypothesis. You see other people give different arguments for the simulation hypothesis, but most simulation theorist characters have some sort of fine-tuning as one of the reasons why they think that we live in a simulation. There are some other arguments about why we live, like, oh, I don't want to get into, they're not related to philosophy of religion. Anyways, some people believe in a simulation hypothesis. That's a version of an intelligent, so I want to point out, just because the intelligent designer is on the table, doesn't mean that the intelligent designer is God, right? The intelligent designer could be like a computer scientist who's simulating our world, and our world could be a simulation. Okay, don't want to ask that question. Okay, I forget. Oh, I guess, yeah, so these were just supposed to be some like some concerns, like you might say, well, okay, maybe an intelligent designer did put all the constants precisely where they are so that the universe wouldn't fly apart or collapse in on itself, but rather be stable in this more stable configuration that we see here. And that stable configuration allows for life. But is the creator of the universe somebody who wanted to create life and change the constants of the universe so that life could exist? Or did the creator of the universe merely want to create a world with stability, right? That doesn't fly apart and doesn't collapse. Maybe the creator doesn't care about human beings or life, but the creator rather cares about just the stability of the creation so that it doesn't fly apart and doesn't crash into itself. Now, the stability has the side effect of allowing for life, but all the creator wanted was the stable universe. And so first you could point out is that life has not been around, at least on our planet, it hasn't been around for even most of the time that the universe has existed. I think that's true. No, that's not. Yeah, because the Earth's like 4.6 billion years old. And life has been on it for 3-something billion years, but the universe is like 13 billion years old. So life hasn't existed, at least as far as we know, for even the majority of the time that the universe has. What's more, most of the universe is just empty space. So you might say, well, if the creator of the universe really cared about life, why did the creator of the universe make a world that has so little life, right? mostly empty. If you look at all of space and time, mostly nothing. And in the places where there is stuff, that stuff isn't alive, right? So that seems odd if the intelligent designer were going for, so we can admit that there's an intelligent designer, but it might be a simulator and it might be God. And even if it's God, it might be a God who wanted us, but it might be a God who's indifferent to us, right? Maybe there's just a creator who wanted to make something that was pretty, but didn't care that there was humans in it and doesn't have any specific concern for humans. And if we point out that actually, even here on Earth, which is the only place we've so far discovered any life, it's not very nice for life. There's lots of places that one can't live. Deserts where life can't be, dangerous things that want to kill you, viruses and so forth. So most of the world is empty, and in the part that does have life, it's very hard to live, right? Lots of things want to kill you. So it's kind of odd to go, hey, you know, our existence, or, you know, the fine-tuning of the universe proves that there's a creator God who wanted to create, what did they keep saying in the video? Interactive life? I didn't really understand why they said that, but interactive life. Maybe they wanted to say that because they want to say God's some sort of non-interactive life. Don't really know. But yeah, so it's not quite clear that whoever made this universe made it for life to exist, right? There's so little life, and even where there is life, it's hard to be alive, right? So for instance, this is the quote that I was looking for last time. This is J.S. Haldane, talks about how the creator must have had a passion for beetles. So he says, the creator of the universe would appear to be endowed with a passion for beetles, for the simple reason that there are nearly 300,000 species of beetles known, as compared with somewhat less than 9,000 species of birds and little over 10,000 species of mammals. Beetles are actually more numerous than the species of any other insect order. That kind of thing is characteristic of nature, right? So so even if we accept the fine-tuning argument, shouldn't we accept that, shouldn't like the most plausible thing be, there is a creator of the universe who finely tuned the constants of the universe so that beetles could exist, right? Why put humans in the middle of everything and say, we're the reason why the creator of the universe created the universe? If the creator of the universe filled the world with so many beetles and not, you know, why didn't the creator fill the world with a whole bunch of humans rather than beetles if the creator cared more about humans than beetles? And then, so those are some of the possibilities, and the final possibility I want to talk about is this multiverse possibility. So this is the one I think a lot of physicists who do believe in fine-tuning, as we saw, Sean Carroll, he's suspicious of fine-tuning. He doesn't think that there actually is fine-tuning. He thinks it's only sloppy physicists who have reached that conclusion. I am not competent to evaluate that argument, right? But other physicists, maybe they're just sloppy, but other physicists who do accept fine-tuning, rarely do they say, and therefore I believe in God. Now that could just be because they're atheistic physicists who don't like God and stuff. But what's the alternative, would you say, right? Hey, physicists, what's the alternative? So here's the alternative that you often hear from physicists. Component one of the alternative is the accident hypothesis. So it is merely an accident that all the constants are finely tuned for stability and life. But the second part is that we should expect accidents to happen because we exist in a multiverse. So the multiverse idea is that not just does our universe exist, but a bunch of other universes also exist, right? Just like ours, we can't ever go there, so we can't get out of our universe and go to the other ones, but they do exist, right? And in each of the universes, the constants of nature are randomly set. So in a lot of the universes, everything just collapses in on itself. In some of the universes, everything expands and expands, and it's not stable enough for like life to come together. In some of the universes, depending on how much fine tuning you are, you might think there's very few universes where life is allowed to exist, right? So there's some physics that say, well, look, the cosmological constants don't have any explanation. So there's no reason why it has to be this number or that number. So actually what happens is the universe starts in a state where where the constants wiggle around. They could go over here and they could go over here. And so universes break off and expand, this universe with the constant set this way, this universe with the constant set this way, this universe with the constant set this way. And so one of these universes is going to be just by random chance, because there's so many of them. There actually every different way the universe could be has a constant set. There's so many of them that one of them is going to be the fine-tuned ones. And that universe that's the fine-tuned ones, well, what's going to happen there? Well, life is going to happen there. And if life happens there, then the living creatures that are there will say, oh, how did this random chance come to be such that I could exist? But actually, the world wasn't created just for these people. They're just the only people who can exist. Like all the other universes, there's no life, right? It's just in this one universe there's life. And these people are here, and they're the only people around to wonder about, oh, why are the constants so finely tuned so that I can live? And the answer to that question is, they aren't finely tuned so that you can live. You're just the only universe that would allow people to ask that question. There are all these other universes, but people don't live there because they have different constants, right? So that's the multiverse hypothesis. And you'll see some physicists saying that they believe in the multiverse and that they believe in the multiverse because of fine tuning. The explanation for the physical constants that we have is that they're not fixed, but rather that they are variable, and different universes have different constants. And we just live in the universe that allows for people, because of course we do. We're people, right? Where else would we live, right? If we had to guess which universe do we live in, well, it's obviously the one that's finely tuned for life, because that's the only place where people would be. So this is called the anthropic principle, right? If there are enough realized possibilities, there are enough different possible universes that exist, it's not unusual to find yourself in one of them, even if it's rare, right? So like playing the lottery, it's very rare to win the lottery, but there's almost always a winner of the lottery, right? So it's not so out there that you won the lottery anyways. So those are the different ways people approach fine tuning. Some physicists say, I don't believe in it. Some physicists say, I do believe in it, but what this suggests is that multiverse theory is true. But then there is a large contingent of people who say, well, look, that's just a weird atheistic answer. There's no reason to posit a whole bunch of different universes just to explain this. A better explanation is the existence of a creator God that intentionally created this universe with the constant set where they are so that life would exist in it. And then the other and then we have to realize that that argument is consistent with the creator being not really God, but perhaps a simulator who's simulating us in a simulation, something like that. So somebody who simulates our universe in a simulation is somebody who is an intelligent designer. They're just not what we'd normally think of as a god. So that's the fine-tuning argument. My summary of its current state is that not everybody agrees, right? As we saw, there are different possibilities for dealing with it, and the solutions are widely different. It's not like everybody agrees there must be an intelligent designer and then we just debate over what kind of designer it is. It's that there's some physical theories that suggest there's no designer. There's some physical theories that suggest there's no need to posit anything like a designer because fine-tuning isn't real. And then there's some versions and then there are some people who believe that there is a designer and that fine-tuning is an argument for it. So this is something that is popular today, like popular in the sense of a lot of the arguments that you see in philosophy class when you talk about through history, it's like, oh, that's an interesting argument, but people only believed it like a long time ago when they didn't know any better, right? But this is a kind of argument that is contemporary and recent, and there are people active on all sides of the debate today. It's an open issue about whether the universe is fine-tuned, to what extent, and what that tells us about the universe, in particular, as it relates to this class, whether it suggests that an intelligent designer exists and created the universe so that things like us could be in it. Right. Questions so far? All right, good. What do we have for time? 24 minutes, good.